You just heard that was my take on that magical Don't Forget Me intro live at Cigale in 2006, and the purpose of this video is to analyze what is going on there in order to give you a better understanding of that jam and hopefully get, nuanced things that you can incorporate into your own playing. So without further ado, let's jump right into the first aspect, which I have chosen to call triads. So this thing is basically in A minor, a natural minor. There's one deviation from that, but we will get to that later. And within this key, they have chosen to use 4 basic chords, A minor, F, C, and G. But they play them as power chords, but not like this that are used on guitar, but voiced like this, which is suitable for bass. So you can call them 5 chords because you have the root and the fifth, root and the fifth. And what John does here is really straightforward. He just plays the triad version of these chords that is played on the bass. So A minor, F, C, and G. There is one really interesting thing that happens here, and that is that for the last chord of the progression, the G chord, it does this. So he raises the roots, so we have the root and the fifth, and then we raise it so we have the root and the flat 5 or the diminished 5. And if we would play this at a diminished chord, we will get this. And this is a D diminished chord with A flat as the root. But interestingly, John doesn't play the D diminished chord here. Instead, he plays the F diminished chord. And somehow they seem to be related in a way. It do sound like it would work, and as we all know, it do work out really well with the bass. But why is that? Well, if we take a look at the 7 chord version of this, by adding this note to the diminished chord, we now get an interesting phenomenon that actually I learned from Paul David, which is that we get minor third stacked on top of each other. So each of these 4 notes here are 3 semitones apart from each other. And the funny thing is that when you take the last note in the sequence and move 3 semitones, the next note you get is the first note you get in the sequence. So then the feature of this is that if you move this up 1, 2, 3 semitones, you get the exact same notes, exact same 4 notes, but voiced differently. And if we move these 3 semitones again, 1, 2, 3, we get this. And this, reminds us of what John is playing, which is this diminished chord here. So yeah, I believe that this relation is why this chord and this chord seem to work really well together. And by the way, if you studied my road tripping lesson part 2, you have noticed this phenomenon because we do this. What to do here is to take that diminished 7 chord and moving it 3 semitones down each time. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting feature of this beautiful jam. And yeah, let's move on to the next aspect, which is the rhythm. So the rhythm starts off like this. And the thing here is that each time the guitar plays a note, the bass plays a note as well. And we can actually take a look of the bass recording and the guitar recording where I highlighted each time the guitar and the bass plays a note, and we can notice this, both playing it slowly and at full speed. But what happens later is this rhythm structure. And the thing here is that sometimes you play exactly when the bass plays on the guitar, but sometimes the guitar plays something when the bass doesn't, and vice versa. And I actually found that because of this, the rhythm relationship to the bass is quite straightforward, because this is quite easy to play by yourself without the bass. But when I had recorded the bass and tried to play along, I actually found it really hard to get the rhythm right. And a funny thing is that I actually did a cover of this 6 years ago, which I'm not too happy about today, but I guess that means that I'm getting better and better, hopefully. And if you listen to that, you can notice that I feel like completely lost with the rhythm. I know what notes to play, but the rhythm, it feels like I do not really know what I'm doing, and I think you can sense that when you listen to it. But one thing I noticed which helped me a lot to get this right was that each time you play the root of the chord, for instance, for this chord, the root is this note. And you play that note exactly the same time as when you play the root on the 5th chord on the bass. So, you know, on this chord, that is this note. And that happens 3 times for each chord. So if you just keep that in mind, it should get easier to get that rhythm on point. And we can notice this now when we play the bass and the guitar together, both slowly and at full speed, because here I have marked out with red lines where the guitar and the bass play each time they play that root note. And you can notice that cool rhythm effect that occurs now with the bass and the guitar together. So yeah, let's take a listen to that. And now we get into the third aspect, which is the tone. And as I talked about before, John's tone is like on the edge of breakup. So if you play softly, you get quite a clean tone. Even if you play more intensely, you get a more crunchy tone. And I found that he really utilizes this by playing more softly sometimes and playing more intensely sometimes. And that creates a really cool dynamic. So, you know, starting with the swells, you know, first it's quite soft, you know, like this. But then for this next note, I found that he plays that more intensely and also roll the volume pot with higher speed. So you get that kind of expressive sound, you know, like that. And, you know, just that little thing that really adds a lot to the jam, I think. And then we get into the arpeggio part, and I found that it worked a lot better to roll down the volume a little bit there. And I don't know if John did that, but that worked for me. And then, you know, he played single notes like this. You know, like that. And I find that he plays it quite softly and also just playing single notes, and because of that you get quite a clean tone. But then, you know, for the second round I find that he plays more intensely, like. And, you know, that really helps to create that, you know, crunchy kind of effect, a more expressive kind of sound. And I find that he achieves this by playing it more intensely and also by sometimes playing 2 strings instead of just 1. And that contrast there between single strings and soft and multiple strings or 2 strings at once and more intense picking, that contrast going back and forth with that really adds a lot to the expression of this jam, I think. And then we get to the fourth and last aspect of this analysis, which are the improvisations. So, you know, as a guitarist, I guess you can relate when I say that it's easy to get comfortable and to just play a lot of licks within the key that you're comfortable with. Just random licks that I guess sound all right together. But with this, you know, what he plays is really simple, but the way everything is put together in such a logical way to create this feeling of, you know, a journey and moving forward, that is what I find is really, really brilliant, you know. So just like an example, you know, this simple riff. So, you know, in theory it's really, really easy to play, but, you know, to practically come up with that at that moment in time is what I think makes this so brilliant. And you can notice it throughout the whole improvisation. And, you know, there is like a clear structure in the improvisation, and it doesn't feel so random. And that makes it feel like it's a clear intention with each note, which also makes it more expressive. And that is why I would recommend to really study this note for note and not just get the general idea, you know, understand what the triads are and then improvise with that. I would actually maybe do that once you have studied note for note, then maybe you can start to improvise yourself. That is at least my recommendation. So yeah, to conclude everything, you know, in theory this sounds like a really boring jam, you know, you just play basic 5th chord and play the exact same chords on guitar. But when you put all these aspects together, it really creates this synergy effect to make it really, really interesting to listen to. And, you know, when I heard it the first time, I thought this was way more complex than it actually was. And in a sense it is, but not in the way that I thought. You know, it's simple in theory, but like I said, with all these nuanced aspects, it is actually quite brilliant and complex. And yeah, when I did this analysis, I wrote everything down in Guitar Pro. So if you're interested in that, I have a link in the description for that. And if you don't have Guitar Pro, that software, I have a PDF version as well. So yeah, now I thought I would leave you with the bass backing track for this, you know, the same like you heard in the beginning. So for the first bar there is only bass, and then the volume swells start. Hopefully you found value in that. And yeah, with that said, I see you in the next video.